They they think they have to sit in the back. Doesn't have to be. Steve, if I could get you to hand these out. That's the other way you get them to not.
It's hard to have the after lunch slot, Tom. Everybody fell asleep.
Yep, you're missing your naps, so
Yeah.
if I don't put you to sleep, then
You're not doing your job.
I'm not doing my job. So I'll just introduce myself while you're reading that. The first decision you need to make is what on that list you want to talk about.
It's up to
That thing you have in front of you is a 3-day course. And I will tell you this, if you want to talk about budgeting, that's all we're going to get to talk about. So you decide which of those topics you want to talk about, and we'll go to those. And we'll do as many as we can in an hour and a half. So,
Like number one.
like number one. Well, that's a good place to start. That's where my notes start, so
Yep, there we go.
not a problem.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Padding's not so great, but if you want it, it's
All right.
What about number 12 too, when you get time?
Number 12,
This day,
the family.
what are we gonna do with our money when we get real old?
Okay.
80 or 65?
Are you getting up there? Okay.
Don't have anything left by you get there. No. What's the Bible say about that?
Well, that's two. We'll probably have time for more than that, so you can read that over and decide what you want to talk about. And I'll start with number one, because it won't take very long. Money defined is nothing more than a means of exchange. Could be cash, could be checks, could be credit cards, charge cards, debit cards, bank loans, and other loans. Those are all forms of money. Some people don't believe that, but that's what we barter with today. We used to barter with goods. We used to barter with, other things that we had, but when they invented money, then that all changed. In Luke 12, verses 18 to 21, it talks about a man who had a lot of surplus, so he decided to do what? Tear all that down and build new ones. And what happened to that man? He didn't last long, did he? God told him a little bit about what we're going to talk about this week, which is where is your treasure? Well, his treasure was right here on earth, and it didn't work. And a lot of people that define money, that is their treasure. That's what they work for their entire life, is the money of some sort, credit cards and checks, et cetera, et cetera. But money is just a means of exchange. There are 3 key truths to this money thing. The first truth is God owns everything. Did you know that? What do you own? Very little. God owns everything. And if you go with that concept, that changes your concept of treasure and what you need to be doing. The second concept is even harder. Accept what you have. Do you accept where you're at right now? A lot of people don't. You've heard the phrase, keep up with the Joneses. Well, that's one of those concepts where they don't feel like they have enough. They need to have more. But the key truth to happiness is accept what you have. And the third truth is seek his kingdom and submit all your requests to him. He is your financial advisor. There are so many things that we do ourselves. We make decisions ourselves. But if we truly believe that, to begin with, it's all his own, if we truly believe that he is the financial advisor ultimately, we need to turn these things over to him and get his input on whether we need them or don't need them, if nothing else. Because that's important in our life. The thing that happens most often, and we talk about this in another session that we're talking about, but so many people get things mixed up and think that they are in control. We control our checkbooks, we control credit cards, and if you believe that, then you've got a real problem, because they're going to control you eventually. But we need to understand the concept that money is nothing more than an exchange thing. That's all it is. But there's so many people in this world that think money is everything, and it's not. I mean, it's just like the old barter system used to be, where you would exchange grain, or you would exchange horses, or you would exchange something else. That was the old barter system. Well, we did away with that, and we turned it over to money. But let me warn you, have you heard of the new concept that's coming out? It's called digital money. You know what that is? That means that they're going to control your bank accounts, your savings accounts, and everything that you have. If they get it approved, that's what's going to take place. And they're in the process of doing it as we speak. Your president thinks that's a great concept. That's the way he can get to your money.
I thought they already passed that or did that like a week or two ago.
They have done it's a stage thing, and they're in like stage 4 of stage. I think there's like 5 or 6 stages, but there's definitely headed that way. And be careful, because that's what all these internet ads are telling you about now. You need to remove your money out of bank accounts. You need to remove your money out of IRAs. You need to remove all this stuff and put it in something they can't get a hold of. Well, there are devices that you can go to. If you're interested, I can tell you after class some of those things that they're talking about. But be careful, because it's coming. Unless we stop it, it's coming. So
If they don't like what we have to say, they can take care of your money too.
yeah,
They can wait.
because digital currency will give them the means to access all of your accounts and funds. And the other thing they already have control of is, have you ever been on the internet the last 6 months and taken a survey? You know what part of those surveys are for? Do you like this president? Do you like this? Do you like that? Well, if you don't, they're going to do something about it. I mean, that's the only reason for those surveys to come out, is because they want to get a hold of your funds. They want to get a hold of the things that they're talking about. And that is one easy way of doing it. It used to be hard, but now it's pretty easy. If you subscribe to those surveys, then you've pretty much let on who you are, what you believe in, and what's going to happen. So be careful. The thing that I would want you to remember about this whole thing is that we think money is our answer. It's not. We need to be changing our attitude. We need to rely upon Him, not the money, not the credit card, not those things, but rely upon Him, because that's what it's all about. Any questions? I said this was short and sweet, so he picked an easy one. Any questions?
On that third, key truth, what was it after God, seek God's kingdom?
Seek His kingdom and submit requests to Him.
Okay.
In other words, if you have something coming up, like you're going to buy a house like we just did, or you're going to buy a car, or you're going to buy something, don't rely upon your own self. Seek His answer, and He'll give you one. The problem in our family is sometimes that answer was no. We always want a yes, don't we? Whenever we ask God for something, we want Him to say yes, but sometimes the answer is no. We need to pay attention to that too, because there's a reason why He said no. And it's probably because we can't handle it.
We have something else to do with it.
Yeah. Bob?
Well, with digital currency, if you have $100 in the bank and the digital system kicks in, will you still have $100?
No.
You won't.
Nope.
So you have 100 digits. That,
You have 100 digits, and you're no longer in control of those funds.
I
You
read,
think you are, but they can take it away overnight.
I read something that they were only going to allow you 20,000.
They're
And-
still setting limits.
And, well, that's the last thing I read.
Yeah.
And that's all you got. You didn't get any more.
If you believe your president, he's already down to 10,000 and going. But I said, if you believe him, I haven't, he doesn't tell the truth most of the time, so it's up to you.
I
But,
believe the people that are behind him, so.
well,
Are you being recorded right now?
I,
That way you don't wanna tell us what those, places are we can put our money that they couldn't take?
yeah, I'd rather not do that publicly because this will go out. But there are solutions to this. Any questions that I don't answer, get back with me, and I will either give you an answer or send you an email, or I'll do something to answer your questions, because I don't like to give answers that don't satisfy.
If you have money, yeah, I just went blank. Anyhow, for instance, if I have like $200 in my wallet, and the digital money, does the $200 in my wallet, is it usable? Like because with the digital, everything's supposed to be done on a computer or something like that. It's not supposed to be able to use with just your plain money. Can you use just regular money?
Under their system,
$100?
cash will disappear. It will
what I
no
thought.
longer be.
So it's not usable.
It won't be usable if they get their way, so. Which topic did you want? Was it retirement or was it estate?
estate plan.
Estate planning? Okay. Okay, estate planning is nothing more than arranging to dispose of your assets when you die. Okay? And the vehicle that we use for that is a will. And a will is a written, signed document that you write, hopefully with professional assistance, showing how you would like your belongings shared when you die. Now, there are different kinds of wills. Did you know that? There's a living will, which is just has to do basically with your health and whether you want to have assisted help in the process of going away, or whether you just want them to turn the machines off. But there are other kinds of wills too. You need to talk to your lawyer about what they are, but we have it a little different than a will, because a will stipulates certain things that I didn't want. So we've gone to a different type of a will, which is something that the government cannot get a hold of or use. They can take you to probate on your will, and then, but this kind of deal that I have, you cannot, they cannot. So I can't remember their name right now, but I will come up with it. But it's a different kind of a will. But in order to have a will, there are 4 conditions that you must meet. You must be at least 18 years old. I guess everybody in this room qualifies, right? Some states it's 21, but most of them it's 18. The will must be written and signed at the end. It must have at least 2 people must witness the will. And anyone who will benefit under this will cannot be a witness. So those are the 4 conditions for a will. Why should you have a will? If not, the government rules will apply. So it's essential that you have something to dictate what you want, and a will is the vehicle you use. In the will itself, that should contain the following: how to divide your assets, net of the liabilities that you have, specific asset lists should be there. In other words, whatever you're going to give out to everybody, that should be listed somehow so they know what you're talking about and where to find it. Some people have it locked away. Some people have it in a storage place. Some people have it at grandma's house. Or, you know, you've got to define where it's at and what it is. And the names of the people to share the estate with. And those people are called what? Beneficiaries. So you're naming the beneficiaries of who's going to have your assets. And you also need names of an alternate beneficiaries, because that may change over the course of time. So you not only need to list beneficiaries, but you need to list an alternate beneficiary in case those people pass away, or you just get mad at them. I mean, there are all sorts of conditions that could happen, but you need to have an alternate beneficiary. There are even some circumstances, and the book that I used for most of this said there's a situation called a disastrous circumstance where the whole family dies. You need some sort of alternate plan outside the family in case that happens. Otherwise, you know where it goes. It goes to the government. And they determine who gets, and guess who gets it? Most of the time, it's the government. Unless there are some close relatives. If minor children are involved in the will, you need to name a guardian for those children, someone that they can go to. And you also need a name of an executor and an alternate to perform the following. This is what they have to do. They have to pay the funeral expenses. They have to collect money owed at the death. In other words, if people owe them money, they're the ones that collect them. They have to pay any bills outstanding at the time of death. After paying all the costs, then they deal out your assets to the beneficiaries as you dictated. And they also, in the will, most wills have some sort of funeral arrangements that are made. So those are all things that could be contained in a will. There also may be a trust that you set up in a will. Well, why would you want a trust? Well, if you want to leave a stream of income to children or grandchildren, then putting a clause in there about a trust, this trustee who you name within the trust pays out periodically those payments. But this is a separate vehicle. You need to have a trust set up so that you can do that. Otherwise, all payment is made right at the point of death when they divvy up all this stuff. If you want to give out income regularly or sporadically to churches or charities or anything like that, you need to set up a trust. If you wish to pay out assets over a physical period, then you need to set up a trust. Otherwise, most of this will be taken care of right at the time of death when they arrange it, and you go to probate if you need to, and then everything is paid out at that time. So if you need it to be paid out over a period of time, you need to establish a trust. How do you prepare a will? Well, the key document is something that the author called a material asset statement, which is nothing more than listing your assets and your liabilities. This is where you stand in your physical life so that they know what they have to distribute and any bills they have to pay. All these things are an asset and liability sheet, which you need to prepare ahead of time so you know what to put in the will. One of the things that I have listed there is the financial advisor. A financial advisor is a big help in something like this, especially if you're not an accountant, and most of us aren't. So, but you need some vehicle to list your assets and your liabilities and everything that's going to be dispersed and paid. So that's a key document that has. A financial advisor, what I just talked about, will help you with the financial plan that includes that statement and will tell you about taxation and other matters which come up during the course of paying out these funds. So if taxation becomes an issue, then there's ways that you can limit, not completely eliminate, but limit those taxes. And a financial advisor is good for that. You need to leave your will somewhere where your executor can get a hold of it and tell him where it's at and leave clear instructions to carry out your wishes. And you need to follow all the legal procedures to ensure that your executor will settle the estate quickly. Otherwise, you're going into all sorts of issues with lawyers and with relatives who want this part and they didn't get that part. Make sure it's a legal document. Make sure that it's been executed properly so you can avoid all that hassle. It should be an easy thing to do. But as you are all having been raised in families, you know different. Some of them want this, some of them want that, and there's arguments over everything that's in there. But if it's identified in the will, you've taken care of that. Doesn't matter. How do you select an executor? Well, what do? I chose a couple of my kids, but both of them are in the financial industry, so I thought that was helpful. But you need to find someone that understands what wills are all about, what finances are all about, and can overcome family situations. You know what I'm talking about. So you need an executor that can do that. You should be able to carry out your request and have unblemished integrity, share your values, and be reliable. All those things should come into a play when you're determining who an executor should be. Could be a professional firm, but if you get a professional firm to do it, there's a fee attached. And that fee is normally a percentage of the estate. So it could be a hefty fee, depending on how much you have to do. So be careful if that's the way you go. Realize that part of that money isn't going to your family, it's going somewhere else. But it could be used. Keep your will in a safe place with a lawyer in a fireproof safe. Tell the executor the location and keep the current version and destroy all other versions. you've read on, or you've seen on TV where they've had 3 different sets of wills. And the 3 different sets of wills gave money to 3 different kids. So if you have a will and you change it, destroy the old will and just have the current will. That's what you want. That's why you changed it. Well, that's in essence what you need to do. One more thing, power of attorney. You all have, oh, someone has a question. Roger?
Well, it's by way of a statement, I guess. If you don't have a will, you haven't explained what happens at your death. I mean,
If you
if
don't
you
have a
don't-
will, the government will take care of it for you. It'll go to
You'll-
probate and they will determine where all the assets go. That's why I said it's important to have a will, otherwise the government decides. And in a lot of cases, the government ends up with your money.
I just wanted that
Yeah.
clarified.
Yeah, it is essential that you have a will, and I hope all of you do have a will. If you don't, I would get one pretty quickly. Any other questions? Power of attorney, everybody knows what that is? It's a legal document in which one party gives another the right to act on his behalf. I would recommend that spouses give each other power of attorney. And I say that for 3 different reasons. Number 1, if one becomes incapable, the other can do all the things that need to be done. If the one who has the power of attorney is incapable, you have a problem. Then it goes back to a lawyer. Then it goes back to an argument. Then it goes back to all sorts of things. So I would recommend that they both have power of attorney, and that way you can use either one. If one is out of town, the other can decide matters that normally are decided by 2 people. But if they're out of town, the power of attorney gives them the right. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't call the other person and get their advice and get their consent. It just means that in certain matters, you have to be there in a court or in an office or in a bank or someplace. You can handle that if you both have power of attorney. If both of them become incapable, the stated attorney in the power of attorney can decide what happens or do those things for you. But if that's within the document itself, if they are both incapable, then you assign an attorney to take care of that, or a financial advisor or someone of that nature. But usually it's an attorney because it's called power of attorney. So that's what usually happens. The last thing is a living will, and we already talked about that. I hope you all have living wills, because when my mother was on her death bed, that's the first thing they asked for. They want to know whether they're going to do anything to resuscitate them or keep them alive, or if it's her wish just to pass on. And that's what a living will does. Sometimes they won't allow sons and daughters to do that unless a living will is there. Sometimes they will, but there are times when you need that document, and we ran into that. I told them she didn't need this, she didn't need that, but they wanted the living will in order to confirm her wishes, because that's what matters, her wishes, not mine. Did you get enough information? Okay? All right. Any other thing on that list that you want to talk about? I try to go through these as quickly as I can to get to as many as you want, but like I said, it's up to you. This is your class. I've already got one request after class, so I'll have to remember that. Any other thing on that list that you want to talk about?
Money value and
Number 5. The first thing you need to consider on money valuation is a thing we call inflation. Do you know what's happened to us in the last 3 years? You know what that affects? You all have IRAs. You all have retirement plans, saving plans. All those things are affected by that inflation, which is going skyrocketed. And we have a president right now that doesn't seem to care about that. But it has a big impact. If you get 5% in your bank deposits, which most of you don't, when this thing was written, you could get 5%, and now I can get, I think 4.6 is as high as I can get with the savings account, but and your inflation is 14%, you lose. I mean, you just physically lose. So inflation is an important factor in valuing money. The time value of money is based upon interest rates at future dates, and it's compared to a present value of the same. In other words, what is this thing that you own today going to be worth 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the road? That's the time value of money. And you can make investment decisions, you can make loan decisions based upon what that time value is. I could give you tables that show, you know, if it goes up 5% or 10% or 15%, what that amounts to. But there are some big numbers there if you look at them. And what's hard to believe is this $10 today is worth $10.50 next year, but it keeps graduating year after year. So after 5 years, it's worth some money. After 10 years, it's worth a lot more money. And so you have to take those things into consideration. If you get a 25-year loan on your house or a 30-year loan on your house, what's that loan worth 20 years down the road? It's different than what it's worth today. So that's what time value has to do with. Investing has to do with that. It has to do with cash flows. Investing, there are four different kinds of investing. Investing to save, reserved, kept for future use, refrain from spending. So that's savings. That's an investment. There's also a thing called just investment. Apply or use for profit. So that's a little different thing. Savings, we want to keep a hold of. We don't want to have anything affect it. Investment can change with fluctuations of the market. It could go up, it could go down, but that's what we do. We invest hoping that we're going to receive a profit. The third thing is speculation. Invest in stocks, hoping to gain, but may lose. In other words, that's just sheer speculation. Someone tells you that such and such is going to go up in the next 2 weeks. Well, you better determine who such and such is and where they're getting their information from, because that's speculation. That's not relying on any sort of financial advisor, stock advisor, any of those kind of people that follow this on a day-to-day basis. It's their speculation. And guess what the fourth one is? It's worse than speculating. Gambling. It's called gambling. A lot of people do that. They go to Vegas hoping what? That $100 that they took there is going to come back with $10,000 or something to that. That's gambling. That's all you're doing. And the sad part is there are people there knowing that they're going to take your money. The odds are so much against you that that's just sheer gambling. I mean, that's all it is. It's nothing more than that. What the author recommends and what I have done in my life is you start a capital fund. And when I say a capital fund, it's something that you are setting aside yourself for future purchases. Like if you're planning on buying a house in 5 years or whatever it is, if you're planning on buying having to replace your refrigerator, your washer, your dryer, any of your appliances, if you set up a capital fund and put in so much each year, by the time that you have to have it, guess what? The money is there. But please put it in a savings account. Don't put it in the market, because next week it could all be gone. And next week it could go up tremendously.
I thought a savings account could be gone too.
Well, like I said, digital might do away with that. So I know my grandparents kept it under their mattress, so that's a different form of saving, but you don't gain anything, but you definitely don't lose anything.
The girls at the bank gave me a hard time and said, Bob, you need to put this money in, into this account and get some interest, which I'm sure they were right. I was planning on spending it, but didn't. And so I said, well, I don't want to put it into a savings account like that I can't touch and get that money when I need it without some kind of a big penalty. I said, because I might need it. And they told me, I don't even know what it's how ignorant I am. I don't even know what I did put it in, but it's a savings account that I'm getting, I don't know, 3.5% or something, which is better than what I was getting, believe me. And I can still access that money without a penalty. And I don't know if that's an IRA or what it is, but
Yeah. Right.
it's just a savings account.
One source that you can use, I don't know how much longer that's going to be, but if you have these situations where you're wondering where you can put your money, there are bankers who will give you an answer. There are bankers who won't give you an answer. I use Morgan Stanley. They will let you know. But I know there's a bunch of banks that won't. They won't tell you that because they're in cahoots with this whole thing that's going on with digital. So be careful of who you use or how you use them. But capital fund is just a way of being able to make future purchases by having the money yourself rather than having to do what? Borrow. And that's the ultimate solution, is you don't want to be beholden to anybody. What does the Bible say about that?
Don't be owing anybody anything except to love them.
Also says the borrower
I-
will say we're slave to the lender.
And I've tried to do that in my lifetime, and the only place where I have failed is when I had to buy a house. There's no way around it unless you can save $200,000 or $400,000, whatever it is. Then you are owing on that house.
Unless your house has wheels on it.
Well, ours doesn't, so we thought about that too, and yeah. There are 4 key players in investing. First player is you. You have to be a part of it. You can't let it be done by somebody else. The second key player is some sort of management. Reuters is a good source for that. If you're trying to invest, use an outside source that will give you. They won't speculate, but they will tell you to the best of their ability what's happening with certain companies, what's happening in the market, what's happening here and there. They are a good source. There's also what they call security analysts. And that's all they do. They deal with securities and they can give you opinions of what's going on. And first of all, they're investment advisors. But be careful, because some of these investment advisors, like I used Morgan Stanley once. You know what they sold you? Morgan Stanley stock. So be careful of who you use as an investor, because they have another purpose behind. They get paid on the stuff that they sell. So be careful, because that can create a conflict of interest that you don't want. But these are the 4 key players that you need to use if you're going to invest. Okay, that covers it, unless you have some other questions about it. I will not give you any stock tips. I will not give you any history of what I've gone through, other than to advise you that I've used some financial advisors that I shouldn't have used. But I learned my lesson. I found out what they were selling, and I stopped the transaction. I said, you're selling me something that's causing you profit. I said, and that seemed to be their only basis for selling it to me. So be careful. But there are good financial advisors who will advise you properly. Anything else? That's a long list there, guys. Like I said, I'll cover anything except budget, because we don't have time for budgeting. So. And most people don't budget. Did you know that? Do you budget? I mean, we've budgeted for how many years, dear? Forever. Okay. And there's a purpose behind it. It avoids surprises. And it tells you where you're at, which is what you need to know, because you see something that's going up and up and up and up, then you need to do something about it, because it's not meeting your budget anymore. We had to stop going to McDonald's because we were spending too much eating out. But you don't know that unless you record it somewhere. And it was a good thing. I mean, it was convenient, but it was also costing us money. But you know what? It costs more now than it did back when we stopped doing it.
It must have worked, because I only been to your house one time and you fed me steak.
Well, your budget should always be lower than what you're.
And what you didn't know is that probably came from Roger.
Yeah.
We bought a couple sides of beef from Roger, and that's where that steak comes from. So.
Just so happened, I think that was the next place I had dinner. On that journey.
Tom, I didn't, I just came in, and you said you weren't going to cover the budgeting, but what is the peace control, just for information?
Key control to investing? Is that what you were talking about? For budgeting?
Under budgeting, you have peace control.
Okay.
What's that referring to?
The key control to budgeting is recording and analyzing. You record your expenses, and then you go back and analyze what took place. And the analyzation should tell you what you're spending too much money on, or what you're not covering. As I said, budgeting sometimes brings up surprises, because you have an expense that you didn't budget for. Well, you turn that around and you start budgeting for it. But there's all sorts of reasons for doing it. But if we were going to do that today, I would get to about half of what you need to know about budgeting. So that's why I said either we do budgeting or we do the rest of them. So.
Did you, the 3 essential financial planning steps, did you cover that? Number 3.
No, we didn't, but we can. Step number 1, Settle your eternal worth, your position with Christ. Decide to surrender your life to God. Christ gives you his Holy Spirit to teach you and guide you. Step number 2, find out your material worth. You need to determine a net worth statement of assets and liabilities, which we talked about before, so you know where you're at. You need to determine debt ratios. What is your debt ratio? In other words, how much debt do you have compared to what you have in total? What is also your ratio for your interest payments that you have to make?
What is considered a good debt?
The author said 0,
Well, I would assume so, yes.
but I would say anything under 50% you ought to start with. Because if you're over 50%, you're in trouble. I would say most houses that I've talked to people at, it's usually 35-40%. They've done a good job of doing that, but if you just bought a house, it could be 70-80%.
Yeah, the 65%, something like that,
Yeah, so it can go up. Roger, what's your debt ratio?
I think my debt rate was still 0, but I think it's advisory if you don't go over the 29% of your gross net worth in your debt.
Well, that's why I said you got to know your net worth before you know your ratio. So that's important. But like I said, the bank would love to have you go up 60-70% because what happens when you don't repay? You lose it, and then they can sell it to somebody else. So
You have to have the cash flow to take care of your debt.
you got that right, 'cause that's what they talk about. In order to get down to 0, you first need to repay non-mortgage loans. And there's, your car loan, your appliance loan, your, whatever loan that you have other than your mortgage. You repay all those first, and then you work on your mortgage. Some people say you can't do that. Dear, tell them how many houses that we've paid for.
I think this is our third, but also a good thing to consider when you are paying off your mortgage, to not pay more than what your payment is. So if you're paying $500, I'll just pick a number, $500 a month on your mortgage. If you pay $550, $575, you pay it off a lot faster, and since it's paying off more, you're paying more on your next payment toward paying off your house. So you get it paid off faster, and it saves you a lot of interest, so you save money that way too. Our first house that we were in, we were paying off only $33 a month toward the actual principal of our loan. And I thought, this can't happen again. So the next house we bought, we were only in it 4 years, I think. But the next house we bought, we did that, and we had it paid off in 11 years. So it's good to put some extra toward it.
The other thing you need to realize is that the bank will fight you. If you pay an extra $50, unless you write on that check that this is for principal only, guess what they'll apply it to? Next month's interest. So that's just a clue for you in case you want to do that or have done that. If you do that and then look at your statement the next month, you'll find out that could have been applied to interest instead of And their excuse is they have to pay that interest for next month, so they just use that as a buffer. It isn't right, but then if I went to a lawyer and he said, well, just write for principal only, and they can't do anything except apply it to your principal. As long as you make your monthly payments, that's where it goes. But be careful with banks, because they will want your money, and that's a way of making money. Okay, step number 3. Find out your life goal. What is your personal mission? What do you want to do? And be alert to what God asks you to do, and do it. You will find a path. There are material goals as well. Long-term, retirement, investment, and savings, which we talked about. Short-term, vacations, education courses, some of that stuff that we need to be aware of. And then financial health goals, reducing your MDR and DRR, which are those two debt ratios that we talked about. Getting them down to 0 or close to that anyway. So all these things have to do with that. That was quick and easy. Next. I want to talk about debt. If you guys don't want to talk about it, I will. Okay? That's what we're talking. Well, we just started there anyway. So, if you have credit cards, what are you supposed to do? The first goal.
Run them up, chop them up.
That's the second goal after you've done the wrong thing. But what's the first thing that you need to realize when you have a credit card?
You have to pay it off every time.
You pay it off every month. It's nothing like, it's not a thing that you can use as a borrowing vehicle. You know what the interest rate is on a credit card? 18, 19, 21. It keeps going up. It doesn't make any sense to borrow against that. If you have credit cards, it's a sole purpose use, an immediate thing that you need to pay off somewhere where you're at, like the grocery store or the hardware store or someplace like that, where most of us don't carry a lot of cash around. Most stores don't take checks a lot anymore, but they will take credit cards. But if you're using a credit card, ensure that at the end of every month you pay it off. Otherwise, you accumulate debt, and you accumulate it quickly. When you get a statement next month, look at it. There'll be a balance on there, but there'll also be a line item that says, this is all you owe. This is all you have to pay. You know why? Because at 18%, we can make money off the difference between your balance and... You'll see that on your credit card. I mean, it's right there, You might have a $200 balance, but what you then have, it'll say you only need to pay $25. Well, where does the rest of that money go? Well, it just goes to interest rate. And after 3 or 4 months of that, you have a big balance and a lot of interest to pay. So they're after you, but you need to be wary of that. Credit cards are pay monthly. Any of you co-sign on a note?
I foolishly did once.
Foolishly, okay.
Foolishly, because I had not understood the scriptures and Proverbs that told you not to.
Okay. Anybody else co-sign on a loan? Good experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
We helped our daughter get a pickup, but she was very faithful. She made the payments, and we never had any problems.
Great. What you signed, when you signed that document for co-signing, is that if they stop making payments or they can't make payments, guess who pays it off? You do. But if your son or daughter comes to you and asks you to co-sign, they don't know that. They just say, the bank told me I had to get a cosigner. Read the document if you want a cosign, because it tells the stipulations, it tells you your liability, and it tells you that they might sell that vehicle off, and then you're still owe whatever the balance is. So, I mean, it doesn't stop just with the stop of the payment. I mean, if they buy a $10,000 vehicle and sell it for $2,000 and there's a $6,000 balance on the account, you still owe that. There's no way around it. That's what co-signing is all about. The bank wants to guarantee their money. They're not trying to be your friend. They just want their money. That's all there is to it. Borrowing assumptions that are false. The future will always resemble the present. You're borrowing today, you think the future will be just like it. Any of you want to tell me what the last 3 years should have taught you? What's your future look like now compared to what it was 3 years ago? Borrowing assumption number 2, you have no alternative. You have to do it. Your car breaks down, you have to get it fixed. Anybody ever tell you that? And so what do? You go buy another car. Well, there are other ways of resolving that issue, and it's not from borrowing. So be careful. And the third thing it says is Jesus sees you as you see. No, he sees you as you are. Not the way you see. His thinking is a whole lot different than yours, so do not fall under that thing. Cars break down, you borrow to repay or you replace, you don't know what you left. Life will be like tomorrow, but God has alternatives, and don't put God in a box. He will find a solution. You ever put God in a box? You ever hear prayer requests? Don't you offer a lot of solutions to God? Just turn your problem over to Him. He will provide the solution. He has all sorts of them. The only solution I didn't care for is when He said no, but that's a solution. And He was right. Believe it or not, He was right, and I was wrong. How about people who pray for a financial miracle? What do you do with them? I've heard that in church. I hear it more often than I want to, but I hear it. Praying for a financial miracle. What are you doing? You are telling God the results you want. You're not offering Him even a choice in the matter. Here's what I want, and here's what I want you to do, God. And you're suggesting your solution is the best. Don't do that. I go tell people when they do that it's not, you're putting God in a box. He doesn't live in a box. You do. What is the financial cost of borrowing? And I'll give you an example of what happened to somebody. And you may have done this, or you may have heard it done. On 1/1 of whatever year it was, you bought furniture. No payment due until the end of the year. Well, the end of the year came, and you did what they told you to do. You didn't make any payments. And guess what happened? Interest hit. And so that $5,000 worth of furniture is now $6,500. And guess what you have to pay? You don't pay $5,000, you pay $6,500. You know, you didn't have to pay anything for a year, but they made up for it. And they were sitting there with their fingers crossed that you weren't going to make the payments. They do a lot of that. That's a lot of advertising gimmick, to get you to borrow, and then you pay for the rest of your life for what you borrowed. So there is a big cost in borrowing. Um, removing the debt. How do you remove the debt? Focus on changing you. Change your attitude. I've heard so many people tell me, oh, you can't pay your house off. Oh, I just have so much debt, there's nothing I can do. Well, there is. Change your attitude, change your opinion. It can happen. Accept your condition. Don't blame others. What do people do? Not my fault. And even though I acquired the debt, it's not my fault. It's the bank's fault. They should have never lent me the money. You ever hear that one? They're going to lend you the money because that's how they make money. Did you ever consider this? The bank will pay you 5%. You know what they'll loan you at? Oh, it's about 9–10%. That's their profit. That's how they make their money. They'll pay you 5%, but they'll turn around and loan it at 9% and make a bunch of money. Okay. How do you determine where you are? How do you determine the condition you're in today? There's one easy way of doing it. Record the last 6 months of your expenditures and then analyze them, which is what we were talking about with the budget. An eye-opener is all the money that you don't apply to credit cards or checks, that you just pay cash for. Analyze that for a month and see where that money went. That's when we stop going to McDonald's. That's when we stop going to McDonald's. You will be amazed at the money that you spend cash for. And that if you don't record it, then you just lose all control of what. I said, money's gone, and what do you blame? You blame your wife, because she took it out of your wallet and spent it, so. But in order to analyze where you're at, you need to determine what you're spending money on. Where is the money going? What are you using it for? Here's an interesting thought. You will pay $100,000 in interest on a $100,000 mortgage at 6% over 25 years. If on 12/31 of each year you pay $300,000 or $3,000 extra, you save $44,000. Did you know they made that much on your mortgage? And it all comes in the first 10 years. The way it is graduated, it just starts there and it goes down. But the money is made up front. But if you pay that extra $3,000 on that mortgage each year, you'll save $56,000. Or no, I mean $44,000. You'll still pay $56,000, but you save $44,000. So consider that. It does make a big difference. But what's the big key? Credit cards. His solution was tear them up, right? Why do you tear them up? Because you didn't do what I told you to do. You pay your balance at the end of every month and you don't have that problem. If you use it as a borrowing device, you have problems. But you know why they gave it to you? So you would do just that. And you know why the interest rates are so high? Because they know you're never going to pay it off. They don't care about you paying it off. They just want their interest. That's where they make their money. Okay, we have a little more time. Is there some other topic that you want to talk about? Well, I've got another one if you want to hang in there. Family finances. Do you guys have family conferences about your finances? Huh?
My joke was with pistols in the street.
Oh, okay. Well, that's one way to resolve it. What's God's goal in marriage? Someone read Matthew 19, 4-6.
On your last question, I don't think you should pay interest on anything but a car or your house. And in order to have financial freedom, it takes three things. It takes diligent work, intelligent spending, and giving. If you don't have all three of those, you will not have financial freedom.
Someone have Matthew? 19, verses 4-6.
Yeah, what, 19 what?
4-6.
4 to 6?
Yeah, I think I've got it written down right.
And it come to pass that when Jesus had finished these saying, he departed from Galilee and come to the coast of Judea before Jordan, and a great multitude followed him, and he healed them. And the Pharisees also coming to him, tempting, saying to him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for any cause? And he answered and said, Have you not read that which he made them at the beginning, made them male and female? That's not the one you wanted?
I may have written it wrong. I'll look it up. Well, that was the one. I had the right one written. It says, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his mother and father and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore is joined together, let no man separate. So his intention of marriage is what? To stick together, right? You know what the divorce rate is today? Have any idea what the divorce rate is in the U.S. today?
More than 50%, isn't it?
It's more than 50%. Well, that's not including the unmarrieds that just live together. But I'm just saying, people who had joined together, make a promise to each other that they will stay together, better than 50% of them don't last. And there's another stat to that. Most marriages don't last more than 3.5 years. And you know what one of the biggest reasons for divorce? I just told you, family finances. They don't know what they got into, and they got into it, and then they don't know how to get out of it, and the only way they know how to get out of it is just what? Go somewhere else and start the whole process again, right? And do it again and again and again. You know the definition of an idiot? It's a person that does things over and over and over again. Anyway, the reason for family finances is just simply that this is one way of trying to control what your finances are, and involvement of your kids is essential to the process because they need to be involved. You can't do it on your own. They need to learn family finance. You know why? Schools don't teach it anymore. They don't teach any of this anymore. When I was in school, we had, I think it was 11th grade, maybe it's 12th grade, but one of those two. We would have classes on checking accounts, on credit cards, on budgeting, all sorts of things that kids don't learn today. And what happens to these kids? Crash, bang. I failed again. Don't know why. So what do? They blame the parents or they blame someone, right? And the parents are at fault in part because the schools are not teaching it anymore. Someone needs to.
Everything is teaching me.
I taught this course here 4 years ago. And I said I would not teach it again until the youth got a class. Well, today they're going to get a class. But it may be a little too late for some of them, but well, we'll see what we can do. But at least they'll have something. But we as parents have to fill the void.
Have you ever watched television? Everything they show on television is you have the right, and everything is your way, and do it the way you want it done, when you want it done, and if it happens that way, nothing's going to work right. Because you have to be responsible, and nobody's taught how to be responsible because they have the right to do whatever they want to.
I've talked to youth who have checking accounts. I asked them, do you do bank reconciliations? And they just look at me like, what are you talking about? And I say, do you compare your checkbook balance to the bank balance so you know what's going on? He says, no, I just know I have this much money in the bank and I can write checks as long as I have a bank balance. And I was thinking about that for a while, and then I thought about my mother who did the very same thing. And then she wondered when she wrote that last check that it bounced. Why it bounced? Well, it bounced because all those outstanding checks became due. You need to do those kind of things, and yet the youth of today don't do it. The only way it gets done, if it gets done at all, is if they have some sort of system in place in their computer that will do the reconciliation for them. And don't realize that's what it's doing. Because they don't, for the most part, know what's going on. But you need that. Just like credit cards. They need to know what's going on. They don't.
I think it's very important, like you say, and you got checks and you write checks. Make sure when the checks come in, if you don't have that, make some kind of a system that you know where the checks went and make sure they went there. We had an instance lately that it didn't go, that the person redone the check, made it go out to her, and instead of going to the person it was wrote to. And it happened in through the mailbox, you know. So you need to be careful.
Yeah. I've had people tell me, well, the bank doesn't make any errors.
All right.
Have you done reconciliation to yourself? The bank makes errors. And the only way it gets corrected is if you do it. Because they're not going to correct their own errors. They don't even care. As long as they have money. But the bank will make errors. Also, during reconciliation, you'll see what their charges are. Do you know what your bank fees are? Hopefully, you've gotten out of that and you don't have bank fees anymore. But there's a lot of banks that still charge bank fees. And where they appear? They appear on your statement. And that's one of those reconciling items you need to do every month to see what they are and where they're charging and why. We have a free checking account, so we don't have to worry about that, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people get charged every month for the right of having their money there.
Or you have to buy your checks and or you, what was I starting to say
You have
now?
to buy your check.
You have to buy your checks and then fail to record how much they cost because you didn't write a check for that, so you don't have a document for that. So if you don't write that down in your checkbook when you purchase your checks or order your checks, then you're that much less, and you don't, if you don't reconcile your checkbook, then that adds up over the time.
They don't save the underneath copy anymore unless you request it.
Anyway, I've got a whole bunch of things I could go with you on family finances, but I think it's essential that your family does have sessions because school's not going to do it for you. Nobody else is going to do it. You need to do it yourself. Eventually, they're going to come to you and say, I don't have any money, Dad. I don't have money down. Well, what happened? I don't know. I had money in the bank last month. So we need some sort of system to teach them these things that they were taught before. Like when I was in school, it was taught. You had bank reconciliations. You had what it happens if you get a loan. What happens there? My son came to me several years ago. He had insurance on his house. He didn't know they had deductibles. He thought he was getting his house paid for, the repairs. He learned there's a deductible. They're not being taught those kind of things, and yet those are the simple things that were there before. One thing that I learned the hard way, you know what mortgage loan insurance is? If you're not able to make a 25% down payment on your house, you are required to carry mortgage loan assurance. And it is expensive. And you know who that protects? Not you. It's just there for the bank. Here's something else I'll just throw out so we don't have much time. How many of you get warranties on your appliances you buy or even your car? You do that? I will tell you, don't do it. It's a whole lot more expensive than if you just pay for the repair. Most appliances have a warranty on them. If they're going to break down, they're going to break down in that first year or two that the warranty is there. But Every time you go to Best Buy or hardware store or any of these places, they want to sell you this insurance. It's because they make money off of it. They make a lot of money off of it. Because they know, just like you should know, that those first 2 years that you're paying that insurance, they're not paying anything out. That's just sheer profit for them. Do not get hung up in that kind of thing. I went to 3 closings on a car, and every time I got asked the very same question. Don't you want insurance? Don't you want warranty on your car? I said, I have warranty. I just paid for it. And well, no, but you need more. I said, why do I need more? Why am I getting this car if I have to have extra insurance? They're just trying to sell you insurance because they make money off of that. It used to be until a couple of years ago, they made very little off of a new car. But they made their money off of the car you traded in. They make tremendous profit off of that. And then all the extras that you purchase on top of it. And then the insurance and all these other things. That's where they make their money. They don't make it off the car. They're guaranteed a profit by the manufacturer, so they don't make a whole lot off the car. But they do make it off these other things. So do not, and well, it's your own choice, but to me, do not buy these warranties because they're not beneficial to you. They just cost you money. Anybody else with another question? Anybody who wants to know about digital banking, I'll get you a website or I'll get you a printout of what an alternative is. Because we're in that phase that we need to talk about that and do something about it. Anybody else?
How do we opt out of digital banking?
Good luck. That's why I'm going to send the information, because this is recorded and they are looking at everything that we do and say right now. Anybody else? Well, I thank you for your patience. I hope that you learned something today.
One question. You said there were several types of wills. Yeah, said
What-
there were several types of wills.
What is our will called, dear? It's a living trust. Yeah. There's, I don't remember the exact name, but instead of getting a will, we get a living trust and we keep the government totally out of it. It's a recent thing they've come up with because they've had so much trouble in probate with wills. So this was a way around it. Whoever your financial advisor should know, whoever your lawyer should be able to tell you. Anybody else? If you want to come back tonight and sit there with your youth, you can, but there will be a class tonight after services for them on finances. And it'll be a primer course because they need to start at the beginning. They're not going to get into all this stuff that we just talked about today, but they need to know the basics, and most of them don't. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to ask you to stand And I ask the brother to dismiss us with prayer, if he would. Yeah.
Our great God, our loving Creator God, Father, we just thank you so much for the things that we've learned here, for the discussion. Remind us that we are responsible for our needs. We're responsible for taking care of what you've given us, and we're just responsible to pass that on also to the young people, to those that they might know of these things. And we just thank you for this opportunity. Father, we give you the glory. We just thank you now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I would like